Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished speakers, our prominent guests, and our notable participants. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. And we are very pleased to be able to welcome all of you. Welcome to the Roles of Social Sciences and Humanities in Dealing with COVID-19 Pandemic webinar, 2nd August 2022. This webinar is a part of the second ITTP COVID-19 2022, and if you are interested to see more details about our webinar and our ITTP COVID-19 teleconference, we suggest you to visit our website at www.ittp2022.org. The ITTP COVID-19, which stands for the International Teleconference on Technology and Policy in Supporting Implementation of COVID-19, is a consortium initiated in 2021 involving 27 universities in the Southeast Asian region, supported by Asian Secretariat and the Asian University Network. This platform is a forum for the Asian community to build joint initiative and synergize various strategies and recovery efforts after the COVID-19 pandemic in the Southeast Asian region. We would like to inform you that this event is now also streamed on our YouTube channel, and you can visit the Faculty of Public Health Universitas Indonesia's YouTube channel at FKMUI to watch it or to check our previous recorded events. The Faculty of Public Health Universitas Indonesia is proud to be able to host this webinar here at this wonderful event with all of you. This event is also supported by the Faculty of Law, the Faculty of Economic and Business, the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, the Faculty of Administrative Science, the Faculty of Psychology, and the Faculty of Humanities of Universitas Indonesia. Honorable participants, allow me, Adinda Safira, to convey today's agenda. Today's webinar consists of two sessions, which will be moderated by Dr. Turo Selrit Swangkareng, PhD, from the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Representing our team, I would like to welcome Dr. Agustin Kusumayati, MSc, PhD, the Secretary to the University of Universitas Indonesia, Professor Dr. Mondasri Karib Sudaryo, MSc, SC, the Dean of the Faculty of Public Health, Universitas Indonesia, and also all honorable speakers from our sessions today. To open this webinar, we would like to invite Dr. Agustin Kusumayati, MSc, PhD, who is the Secretary to the University of Universitas Indonesia, to give the opening remarks. Dr. Agustin, the time is yours.
Thank you, Hansa. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Warm welcome from the Universitas Indonesia campus at Depok City, West Java, Indonesia. Honorable Dean of the Faculty of Public Health, Universitas Indonesia, Honorable Chair and members of the Steering Committee of the second ITTP COVID-19, Honorable Chair and member of the Scientific Committee of the ITTP COVID-19, the second ITTP COVID-19, and all distinguished speakers of today's webinars. Today, we will share some ideas relating with the role of social science and humanities regarding with the COVID-19 pandemic. We will have here Ms. Inaya Rahmani, PhD, from the Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Indonesia. We will have also Dr. Fitra Arsil from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Indonesia. Dr. Kurota Ayuni from the Faculty of Law, Universitas Indonesia, and Ms. Neri Susilawati from the Faculty of Administration Sciences, Universitas Indonesia. While in the second session, we will have Ms. Sali Rahadi Asih, PhD, from the Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Indonesia. Ms. Mina Elvira, PhD, from the Faculty of Humanities. And Mr. Sulistiadi Iskandar from the Faculty of Economic and Business. And last but not least, the moderator of our sessions today is Mr. Turo Wongkaren from the Faculty of Economic and Business. All distinguished faculties, students, researchers, and colleagues from partner universities that gather in this network. First of all, let's praise our God Almighty, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, for the blessing. So today we can gather in this morning in a healthy and positive spirits, although still via online, because we still have pandemic in our countries. As you know that you all know that COVID-19 pandemics that started about 2.5 years ago have already affected so many aspects of human life. Problems in health, we can see that how it affect also another aspect of human life, such as economic, business, and also, of course, social and humanities. So today we will have the privilege to hear some ideas, experience from some colleagues that have their expertise in social and humanities, and they will share with us how the role of social science and humanities in dealing with COVID-19 pandemic that we have just experienced during the last 2 years. I hope that today's webinar will give us inspirations, will give us insights, so that in the future we can strengthen all efforts to control the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to recover our life so that we can live again in a normal situation. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, let me thank all the speakers and also the organizers of this seminar, of this webinar, so that we can gather here in this morning, and then hopefully we will have a truthful discussion during the webinar. Thank you again also for all the participants of this webinar, the faculties, the students, researchers, and all colleagues. Thank you so much for your participation. We hope that our gathering this morning will enrich the material that have been prepared by our researchers, so that we can produce a strong policy brief or white paper to be promoted and given to our governments, so that in the future we can handle the pandemics better and then recover stronger, and also give a more healthier and smarter, and also more prosperous life in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, so not further ado, I conclude my opening remarks this morning. Have a nice webinar, and again, thank you so much for your participation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agustin. Before we continue, we would like to inform our attendees that you are very welcome to use the Q&A feature if you have some questions regarding the speaker's materials today. And for our participants as well, please fill the attendance form, which will be provided in the chat box by our organizing committee. If you want to know more information regarding our upcoming webinar series and our international teleconference as well, please do not hesitate to visit our website at www.ittp2022.org or send us a message to ittp2022@ui.ac.id. To begin today's webinar, we're going to move forward to our next agenda. The following sessions will be guided by Dr. Turo Songkaren, who is our senior lecturer at Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Indonesia. He is also the director of Institute for Advanced Studies in Economics and Business and was the chairman of the Demographic Institute of Universitas Indonesia. He is currently assigned as a part of the expert team in Indonesian COVID-19 Task Force. Without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Turo Sarwitswangkara. Dr. Turo, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Adinda. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is very nice to have you together, all of us together this morning to talk about something that is very important for our life, that is COVID-19. Even though it started from health as an health issue, but soon it becomes bigger. Every aspect of our lives is affected by it, and because it's multifaceted issue, so that in dealing with that, we also have to come with a multidisciplinary force. And this morning, we have opportunity to talk about social sciences and humanities and how they can actually be implemented and used to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. In the first session, I would like to call it the macro theoretical or conceptual and micro perspective, we will have three panelists. The first one, Dr. Inaya, will talk about conceptual perspective. She will talk about the role of social sciences during the pandemic in South Asia. And then we go to the foundation of everyday life that is governed by law. Since the main institution that produced law is the parliament, we want to know what happened in parliament during the COVID, especially in the first period of the COVID era. What kind of law or legal foundation that they produce so that it can serve as the basis for every legal products and others. And we will hear from Dr. Kurata Ayuni, or Bu Ayu, who will present Indonesian Parliament experience in response to COVID-19. We are supposed to have also Dr. Fitra with us. Unfortunately, Dr. Fitra has a family emergency this morning. And the third speaker of this first session will be Ibu Neni Susilawati MA. She will talk about also another macro perspective, that is the tax. Because we know that for 2020, for instance, more than 600 trillion rupiah is spent on the COVID-19 recovery. Where do they get the money? Most of them, well, not most of them, but some of them at least come from our tax. And how do they actually collect the tax also affect not only in terms of collecting the money, but also how it actually affect behavior of people and also behavior of the business, especially when the government was considering to give tax incentive for the people. So without further ado, I will ask Dr. Inaya, but before that, Dr. Inaya, I will introduce her first. She has PhD in Asian Studies from Murdoch University in Australia, and her research interest is political economy, knowledge culture, communication, and media. And she will be speaking on the role of social sciences during the pandemic in Southeast Asia. Dr. Inaya, the floor is yours.
Respon
Dr.
ilmu
Inaya, the
sosial.
floor is yours.
Selamat pagi menjelang siang kepada para peserta. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi panel mengenai respon ilmu sosial, supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah kita lalui selama 2 tahun terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi maupun panel mengenai negara tentang respon ilmu sosial, supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah kita lalui selama 2 tahun terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi sosial dan politik panel saya pada hari ini mengenai respon ilmu sosial pada saat kami menjelaskan riset ini saya akan dari apa yang sudah kita lalui banyak ya terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi bahkan di abad 19 pun organisasi saya pada hari ini ya asal Rusia mengenai kami menjelaskan riset ini saya akan penyebaran TBC pada saat itu banyak ya terakhir penyakit itu menyebar di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia yang sudah kekhawatiran bahwa dia nggak bisa diawasi ya dalam situasi saya
Sorry, it seems that there's some kind of technical issue. At this moment, actually, Dr. Inaya is out of town, and she already sent us the video so that we could hear. We will wait for a couple minutes to see if the technical issue can be resolved. For a minute, I thought that's actually part of the presentation, looping. Oke.
Selamat pagi menjelang siang kepada para peserta. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi panel mengenai respon ilmu sosial pada saat pandemi supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah kita lalui selama 2 tahun terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi maupun panel mengenai respon ilmu sosial pada saat pandemi supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari
Dr. Inaya just sent us information that she's actually in the mountain area, so the signal prevent her to speak directly.
Pagi menjelang siang kepada para peserta. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi panel mengenai respon ilmu sosial pada saat pandemi supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah kita lalui selama 2 tahun terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah mengorganisasi maupun panel mengenai negara tentang respon ilmu sosial pada saat pandemi supaya kita dapat pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah kita lalui selama 2 tahun terakhir secara bersama di negara. Terima kasih kepada panitia juga yang sudah saya dari Fakultas Ilmu Sosial dan Politik organisasi saya pada hari ini.
Okay. So because of the technical issue with the video, actually Dr. Inaya is happy to present directly from wherever she is now, but we are just waiting for the Panitia to show her presentation.
Hi, Fatura and everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I actually prepared a presentation by recording because I wasn't sure about the stability of my connection. Salam hormat Bapak Ibu, Prof. Agustin, Pak Turo. Terima kasih sudah mengorganisasi panel mengenai social sciences and the pandemic in Southeast Asia. Pak Turo, suara saya jelas ya?
Bisa, bagus.
Oke, thank you. Sambil menunggu PowerPoint ditampilkan oleh panitia, saya mau cerita sedikit tentang Pak Turo. Saya pakai bahasa Inggris atau bahasa Indonesia?
If you are willing, it might be better in English.
Okay, in English. This presentation is based on a research that I co-PI'd with Francesco Urbino from the Global Development Network. And it was on the role of social sciences during the pandemic in Southeast Asia in 2021. And we researched 11 countries. So ASEAN countries minus Brunei and plus Bangladesh. Second slide, please. It actually involved 11 primary researchers from the 11 countries who also had supporting researchers as well as assistants carrying out secondary data collection. Some carried out surveys, interviews, etc. To make sure that while the methodologies vary in each country's to suit the context of the kinds of ways the state responds to the pandemic, it must be comparable between countries because we see the pandemic with fundamentally a similar angle, in which if we cite a Prussian physician in the 19th century who spoke of the typhoid outbreak, he said, the spread is actually from the cracks of society, where state protection or government protection is absent, usually in informal sectors of laborers or those with without legal entities that are actually within the authority of the state to protect, but go under the radar. And these are the vulnerable spots in which, because national health systems and social protections can't reach, they become more vulnerable to create new clusters. And he also famously mentioned that medicine is a social sciences because infections and the spreads of viruses, whether infectious diseases or socially constructed or socially affected, triggered mental health conditions, which is on the rise now with increasing labor precarity, are issues of social sciences and the humanities. And the COVID-19 pandemic reminded us that diseases are actually a social issue. So Global Development Network and the Asia Research Center, which I direct under FISIP, carried out this study, 11 countries, with all of these countries involved, and some come from CSOs and universities. Next slide, please. These are the list of the authors who were involved. Second slide, whose names I won't be able to mention one by one, but I think making it known, acknowledging the fact that they were involved is really important, because it's certainly not a single, it was a collective process that needed all of the commitments of the authors and working in such a responsive manner in under 2 months. Next slide, please. We answered these 5 key issues. We wanted to look at the inclusion and exclusion of social scientists, whether through commissions, legal commissions or ad hoc bodies on different levels of the government, so local, national, regional, and also international. Whether there are emergence of research funding for social science in the national level and international collaborations, the connect between research and policy on different levels, researcher-led initiatives set up by social scientists and emerging research agendas for social sciences, because we have not dealt with zoonotic diseases, as well as climate change that will come in the form of a new kind of multidimensional crisis if we don't band together to face it in an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary way. Next slide, please. These are some of the highlights of the findings. There is a clear lack of social scientists in all of the national responses in all of the 11 countries. And in the case of Indonesia, Pak Turo, for instance, and many of my colleagues from the Demographic Institute were involved, but in comparison to the total number of those coming from natural sciences, medicine, and exact sciences, including engineering, it was under 5% when we quantified. Second, which is also across national responses are largely state-driven, so these are top-down, with variations in local level implementation, in which with closer proximity between the government officials, community members, and academics, the faster the response of these alliances to the needs of those who are most vulnerable. And many of the state proponents in these 11 countries see the pandemic as a health security issue, overlooking it and in a socio-cultural way, which makes some, on some levels and in some ways, social distancing difficult to implement in areas where informal labor and income are prevalent. Next slide, please. Another pattern that emerged in all of the 11 countries is that when social scientists were involved, they were technocratic in nature, which means that the research needs to inform policy making in the methods of data collection and paradigms in which the government is used to. These usually comes in numbers, generalizable data, but it's very difficult to obtain data, for instance, on poor women with who are breadwinners of 3 families because they are unique and qualitative in nature. And there is a lack of ethnographers who have immersive data, who have been part of the community for decades, so that policies can be implemented in ways that are specific to the subjectivity of those vulnerable communities. COVID-19 research is also predominantly funded by national governments with a bias towards the medicines because the state sees this as a medical issue, whereas international funding actually are more directed into social sciences and the humanities. So many of the local initiatives are actually in collaboration with CSOs and private organizations are supported by international donors, such as the research that we conducted at FISIP. Next slide, please. How many more minutes do I have, Paturo?
You still have enough time, about 10 minutes.
Okay, that's good. The fifth pattern is that outside of the official structures, social sciences play a crucial role in exposing social dimensions through an alliance between programmers, data scientists, CSOs working with vulnerable communities far before the pandemic occurred, also with doctors, actually, with epidemiologists. And these are people who are part of diaspora communities and scientists outside of the Southeast Asian countries they were born and raised in. So they have this nationalist pull to help people from their home nation to survive the pandemic with the kinds of expertise and skills that they obtained in Anglo-Saxonian universities. And alternative discourses were born out of these alliances, and social media platforms were instrumental in these processes. And actually, many of the policies that are implemented in the health ministry were also driven by the kinds of alliances between the diaspora communities, in the case of Indonesia, with scientists, doctors, and also social scientists and data engineers based in Indonesia. So the mass media, the social medias were actually a space in which these discourses were consolidated, in which social sciences were becoming mainstream into public discourses and consequently touched upon public policies in a less formal and less structured way. Next slide, please. And these are conceptual, but at the same time comparable findings. In Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Thailand, recommendations were widely disseminated through online activities in Indonesia and Thailand, there were community health groups working on local levels. And in Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Timor-Leste, CSOs were at the forefront, and they involved academics and social scientists in their processes to make sure that responsiveness and programmatic support is research-based. Next slide, please. Emerging research agendas are increasingly being focused on vulnerable communities during the pandemic in Bangladesh, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand. Some attention is being given to digital practices, such as in Cambodia and Timor-Leste, and they can be heavy on top-down state funding for some countries like Laos, Singapore, and Thailand, but they also are international in others like Myanmar, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. These, of course, if you read in the report, are affected by the kinds of state systems. So authoritarian regimes or military regimes are state top-down, and democratic contexts like in Indonesia, there is a thriving power network that we can see are competing and collaborating with each other. So it's very unique to see this. And also in Bangladesh, with many of the microfinancing CSOs and social scientists banding together to help during the pandemic. Next slide, please. I think I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to close with a concluding remark. Social scientists play a role informally, but very strongly, and I would assume based on the findings from all of the 11 countries in a more sustainable way in comparison to the kind of regime changes and how it affects policy making in from a top-down manner, because these are bottom-up efforts that are prevalent in Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand. And usually they are in pockets in which there is lack of access in basic services, and they provide a more informal way, research connect with policy making and social protection for those who are most vulnerable. And I'll close with this last slide. The last slide, we need to think together what a common future we want to realize by looking at and unpacking the connections and disconnections between social sciences and COVID-19 policymaking in Southeast Asia, because clearly this is not a nation-bound issue, because we are living in an increasingly globalized and connected world, as the pandemic has reminded us. Thank you so much, Paturo, and I really apologize to all of the speaker and organizers for creating a disruption at the beginning of your wonderful symposium. I apologize tanpa mengurangi rasa hormat. I will return it to the chair, Paturo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bu Inaya. No problem. Actually, it went well, despite of the very little technical glitch before. So what I can get from Dr. Inaya's presentation is actually social sciences, or in this case, social scientists, are there during the pandemic, although it's in a little bit different and two different roles. Number one is more technocratical, and number two is more informal. So it's there, but not completely there. Now, let's turn into something that is more national level, in which that is the parliament. Whatever we have today, the law and everything is a product of the parliament process, or the dynamic inside the parliament. So we will hear from Bu Ayu. Dr. Kurata Anayuni, or Bu Ayu, has a doctorate in law from Universitas Indonesia, and her area of expertise is constitutional law, election, and also constitutional court. Today, Bu Ayu will talk about Indonesian Parliament's experience in response to COVID-19. Bu Ayu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bapak Turo, and then all the audience in the webinar today. First of all, on behalf of Bapak Dr. Fitra Arsil, we apologize that he cannot be in our webinar today because he has a family emergency, and then now he is in the hospital. So I will present on behalf of our paper. Then I ask for maybe for the committee or maybe Hansa to present my paper, my presentation. Yeah. So this is my presentation with Pak Fitra Arsil, and basically it comes from our journal that already published in the next slide in the Journal of Legislative Study in May 2022, and it's titled the Experience of the Legislative Model Indonesian Parliament Experience in Response to COVID-19. So basically, next, it's this paper talk about how the parliament in Indonesia, specifically DPR, Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat, House of Representatives, respond the COVID-19 that happened in Indonesia. The theory that we use is because of the emergency power tends to put a lot of strength in executive, who is president. But what happened in Indonesia today, we find some of dilemma and also a very interesting finding that basically in Indonesia, according to our constitution, we have high president's constitutional legislative power. And then in the current situation, we also have a supporters power for a president that is majority in the parliament. So there's a coalition supported by a majority of the parliament. And then we want to see also about the check and balances in the time of emergency. So, and in my case, in my literature and my study, the COVID-19 pandemic is also can be concluded as state of emergency, a situation where the constitutional law has a different approach in certain situation that can be concluded as an emergency. And then we also see the lawmaking process in the parliament during the COVID-19 emergency. Next slide, please. Okay, the first issue is sometimes in emergency, the executive nearly untouched or unbound. They cannot be fully oversight by another branch. While in the law, in the constitutional law, check and balances is important to make balanced situation between each power, whether it is legislative or executive. In the emergency, sometimes it is not clear how to handle the situation, and sometimes the power given to the executive as free as possible. This situation creates a lot of possibility of abuse of power. Then the theory from Farjan and Pasquena in 2004 explained about the legislative model, which creates the control from the legislative using the law or the applicable law that needs to be used by the executive in times of emergency. Next. In Indonesia, our constitution explicitly stated that the president declare a state of emergency, and the condition for such a declaration and the subsequent measuring regarding a state of emergency shall be regulated by the law. It means that many people in Indonesia, not only from other social aspect, but also in the law community, in academic law community, doesn't understand about the Article 12 in our constitution, because in many historical aspect, the Article 12 are related to the oppression, and then the security aspect, like, and then create traumatic like the Dom Aceh or maybe Dom in Papua. But actually the Article 12 also can be used in terms of emergency, not in the related to the security or the security or maybe defense, but also in times of emergency such as like the pandemic COVID-19. The Article 12 mentioned that the declaration needs to be in the form of the president power, but the term and condition, the subsequent and the law, it needs to be declared or needs to be passed by the parliament. So it is actually what Farjan meant by the legislative model, where the traditional way to state of emergency is give all the power to the executive, but in our constitution, in Article 12, give the power to the legislative to also involve in this distributive dictatorship together to create the balance and check and balances in times of emergency. Next. But what we find in our research is the first, the COVID-19 pandemic has rendered the executive branch more powerful and control many legislative agendas. It is the opposite way that stipulated in Article 12. The Article 12 stated that the legislative should be also have the power to control the executive. But in COVID-19 pandemic, we find the opposite one. The second, the lawmaker tends to discuss legislative product by simplifying the procedure. And then third, the legislative productivity increase. However, it was not follow-up agenda intent to deal with the emergency. And the fourth, the public openly protests and rail in dissatisfaction with the legislative product created by the lawmakers. And then people suspect that the state of emergency would be exploited by the political elites to pass law accommodating their agendas, affording little benefit to the publics. Next. So this is what we discussed in our paper. The first is how is the role of the parliament. In this case is DPR, not in DPD or MPR. And the second one is the budgeting function of the legislative and the legislative function of the legislative. Next. And then what we find in Indonesia response to the COVID-19 state of emergency is that in Indonesia, especially the President of Indonesia, activate the state of emergency by employing Law on Health of Quarantine, Presidential Act number 11, 2020, concerning the coronavirus disease 2019. So this is the law, this is the statement of declaration from the President that activate the state of emergency. So in the case of emergency, the government has the power has discretion to disobey some rules in times of emergency to protect our nation. But it needs to be followed and it needs to be start with the declaration. And the second, the President activate a state of national non-natural disaster emergency based on the law on disaster management. And the third, the President of Indonesia made a government regulation in lieu of law, or we call in Indonesia Perpu, Peraturan Pemerintah Pengganti Undang-Undang. And then this is for the economical issue and also for the election issue. So they postpone the pilkada, pemilihan kepala daerah, and also give the power to rebudgeting in our APBN using Perpu, Peraturan Pemerintah Pengganti Undang-Undang. Next. The declaration of that legislative model was remarked with the issuance of the President Decree of the Republic of Indonesia 11 of 2020 on stipulation on the coronavirus disease 2019 in public health emergency. So what means by legislative model is when the declaration on emergency stated by the president bind with the law. So if the president want to have a discretion or want to break the law, it should be limited what stated in the law. So if the president want to have easy maintain for facing the emergency, it cannot be out of from the guidance that happened written specifically in the law number 6, 2018 about health quarantine. And beside of activate that law, also President declared the Presidential Decree number 12, 2020 on non-natural disaster on coronavirus disease 2019 using and activate the law number 24, 2007 on disaster management. So in this case, President used two laws. The first is the health quarantine law and the second is using the disaster management law. Next, the legislative model is what's happened in Indonesia makes the president as a policy-making initiator. In fact, he or she could be control of legislative agenda in legislator. What's happened in Indonesia? We see that many of the law that passed in the parliament is basically come from the president. So it's initiated by the executive. Next. So we can see the situation of emergency sometimes bring all of the power to the executive to control the parliament agenda. This is the opposite that should be happen according to Article 12, where the government or the executive should be controlled by the parliament. But what we see in 2020 into 2022 right now, all of the bill proposed by the executive are easily passed by the parliament. It is not only because the high legislative power that have in our constitution that give the contribution to the executive, but also the situation where a majoritarian coalition has been become a majority in the parliament in our parliament today. Actually, in Indonesia, there is 9 parties and 7 are the supporters of the president. So the president actually has 471 out of 575 members in the parliament, and then if it has voting, it should be 1 in 81 and 91% of votes in the house. Next, our research also, there's a lot of anomaly in the making of law in times of COVID-19 pandemic. The first is, instead of focusing and then how to make the law easier to reduce the issues of the COVID-19 in health or maybe in economic, but the interesting is also our parliament easily to pass the law that not very related to the COVID-19, even though the COVID-19 declaration state of emergency is not being switched off. The first is the parliament passed the many of the controversial bill like omnibus law, or maybe pass the law on Ibu Kota Negara or IKN, or maybe law on Minerba, mineral and coal mining, which creates a public awareness and public rejection. And then how I can say it's a public rejection, because it's there are a lot of rallies and then demos, and then also those laws are also challenged to the constitutional court, which mean that people is not pleased by the debates in the parliament. So they try to put and transfer their debates not into the parliament. The discussion is ended in the parliament, so they transfer it to the courts. And this is something that is not should be happen, because the discussion about the law should be in the parliament, and then the court should be ended the dispute. And then this is a situation that happens in Indonesia. Next. Okay. So what's I discuss in our paper is also there's a lot of anomaly in productivity. In times of emergency, maybe people say that, okay, DPR will lose their productivity, but the actual happen is the DPR, the parliament, is very productive in creating the law. Sometimes in our experience, in law experience, one law needs 1 year or 2 years to be discussed. But in times of emergency like COVID-19, there is more than 13 law that would have a great complexity that has been passed in a very shortened time. One bill only maybe discussed in 1 month, and after that they pass it. And then another bill like that is only less than 1 month, and then they pass it. In times of emergency, the forum of discussion, public attention to discussion is very minimum, because they need to be focused on health, and sometimes those less of awareness from the public sometimes give them the power to pass the law, and sometimes it also creates another response which bring the law go to the court. Next. And then this is the legislative performance in the first year of general election, and then we can see that the productivity is high in times of emergency, while maybe people will say, okay, in times of emergency, parliament not working well, but in Indonesia, they are super working well. Next. And also this is the complexity. What I mean by complexity is, even though it's maybe a little number, like 16, but one of the law has a very special issue because it's changed more than 70 law. So it's called omnibus law, and then it's very, very huge law in Indonesia, because it changed many law in many undang-undang, in many law in Indonesia. So it's not about the number of the law, but what the changes that it made by the passing one law. And then what I can see in this situation is the heavy of the law that passed in this time of emergency is very heavy. It's not an easy peasy law. It's a very heavy law, and it's very substantial law. And sometimes people not aware about those. And then we agree or not, this situation where there is a lack of participation has become more easy for the parliament and the president to create the law that maybe create that are not involving many of participation from the publics. Next. This is also what I see that I mentioned before, the quick decision process and approval, like it only takes 2 or 3 months. And for law on mineral and coal, law on constitutional courts is also 2 or 3 months. And then for the law on job creation is also, which is a very complex and heavy, is maybe also less than 1 year. So this is something that very unusual in the lawmaking in Indonesia, but happened in time of the pandemic. Next. The procedure simplification. Public participation decreased, as did the implementation of representation function in parliament. For instance, a public hearing to discuss the bill of job creation omnibus law was attended by only 16 stake group holders. So the bill contained many materials, only involve 16 stakeholders. We can compare it to the another law, which is called Eradication of Criminal Acts of Terrorism, that only focus on criminal acts, which involve 37 stakeholder groups, and then also have a 10 working visit and then a lot of time to involve participation from the public. This is what happened, and this is what really happened in Indonesia. So sometimes people might say that less stakeholders, it means participation, because the parliament should be a debate public for participation, because they are the place that we discuss everything and to hear this voice of the people. Next. And also this is the public participation attendance, where we can see that even though the regulation in the COVID-19 that in the DPR, they can also have an online hearing or online meeting, but still less of participation happen, even though it's easier to hear people with the online hearing and Zoom, because people don't have to go to the parliament, to Jakarta, but they have less number of participation. Next. And then the president as the control of the legislative agenda and the absence of legislative model practice. Even though in the Article 12, we are agree that it is a legislative model where it gives the power to the legislative to a little bit control the power of the executive in time of emergency, where traditionally executive is very powerful. So it should be check and balances and limited by the legislative. But in Indonesia, Article 12 is not easily practiced, in control. Because why? Because what we see today is the president is highly controlled on legislative agenda. It's not the vice versa. It should be legislative control the executive agenda. Because the productivity was high, discussion took place very quickly, procedures were simplified, but not engaging the people for participation, and the content material were not directly and closely related to the pandemic. There is no law, and only 1 or 2 law that passed in the sense of COVID. But other than that, it's not related to the COVID at all. And then next, public reaction to legislative agenda during the pandemic. Yes, even though it is COVID-19 and is very risky to people to go to the street to have demonstration, people still go take mass rallies in October because omnibus law, and also most of the law that passed in the COVID-19 area instantly bring to the Constitutional Court. It means that there is a transfer of public debate, that people not pleased with the participation in the parliament, that parliament doesn't hear them, and then they transfer it to the court where they can have a re-debate again in the court. Next, and then conclusion of our paper state that the executive branch as legislative agenda in the parliament, in the COVID-19 parliament, in the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the first is almost all the bills proposed and passed into law in time of pandemic emergency were the initiative of the executive branch. So most of the bill come from the executive or the president. The second, the DPR swift approval of 2 government regulation in lieu of law issued by the government was rarity. Is very, without any question, is very easy and quick because the Perpu is a single initiative from the executive. And then the third, the DPR quickly approved a Perpu in which some clauses actually reduce the DPR's power. So this is what we find after we have research on the parliament in the pandemic COVID-19, and then beside of the how we research the pandemic COVID-19, next we also have a lot some of paper related COVID-19, and then the previous one is in the Scopus Q1, and then the other one is in the Scopus Q2, Q4, and many of the paper related COVID-19. So I think that's all for our presentation today, and then I'm waiting for question and answer session. I give it back to the moderator, Bapak Turo. Please, maybe for the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bu Ayu. That's really interesting. I remember that people said that making law is like making sausage. Remember that there are so many things that probably people don't realize that there's a dynamic inside the parliament itself. And one thing that's very interesting to me is that the fact, even during after they declared that this is emergency period or situation, but the DPR seem to be very busy producing so many regulation that some of them have nothing to do with the COVID itself.
Yes, agree.
So that's what I got from your presentation. Thank you very much. What a very nice presentation.
My honor.
So the next presentation will be also on the government in general side, but in this case is in the perhaps in Lapangan Banteng or in the Ministry of Finance. What happened in Ministry of Finance, especially when they actually thought it might be good to give tax incentive to people during the pandemic, so that it probably at least would make the recovery faster. Ibu Neni Susilawati, MA, holds a Master in Administrative Science from Universitas Indonesia, and her research interests are in income tax, tax policy, and behavioral taxpayer. Today, she will be presenting her research and entitled Evaluating COVID-19 Tax Incentive. Bu Neni, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Turo. Good morning, Pak Turo, committee, and participant. Allow me to share screen for a moment. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, participant and the committee. Thank you for the opportunity for me to share our research result about tax incentive or COVID tax incentive. We are focusing on measuring the policy effectiveness and prospective policy analysis on the extended provision. The research team was me and my students, Citra Yadin Ramadina, Mayang Permata Sarisha Putri, Regina Chanda, and Emerald Haq, who just graduated from the fiscal administration bachelor degree. Okay. As we are from the Faculty of Administrative Science, we much talking about the policy. Policy making strength is an integral part of the government figure. When policy fail, costs would significantly increase. Tax incentive is tax expenditure where the government does not incur costs directly, but through the reduction or cuts in state revenue. In 2020, state spending has increased due to the global COVID-19 outbreak, which has had a negative impact on the economic sector and the business world. Therefore, Indonesia is intensively providing tax incentive as one of the instrument in Indonesian Economic Recovery Program, or PAN. This tax incentive included in the PAN program to provide support the business world, in particular providing support to MSME or SMEs and corporation. Okay, our research was conducted in 2021 on toward tax incentive regulation implemented in 2020, and our research result is disseminated in 2022 and also published in National Journal in Indonesia. Okay, as we can see on the graph, the tax incentive absorption has not been maximized. There are a large gap between the tax incentive budget and tax incentive absorption. Nevertheless, the government has extended the tax incentive provision until end of December and 2021. From our opinion, a prior evaluation regarding the effectiveness of COVID tax incentives policy is necessary before extending the policy into the next year. In addition, a prospective policy analysis will provide benefits for more appropriate extended policy. This is crucial when the government intended to have a significant positive impact on Indonesia's economic recovery. Therefore, our research objective was to identify the policy aims of COVID tax incentives, to analyze the policy effectiveness of COVID tax incentive in general, and to measure the policy effectiveness of employment income tax incentive borne by the government as one of our study case, and to describe the prospective policy analysis on the extended COVID tax incentive provision. We use policy formulation theory for our research. Policymaking Thomas Erdai 2013 says that policymaking can be seen as the process of how policy are made in step-by-step sequence, but in reality, this process overlap and intertwine. And we also use the theory of policy effectiveness. Sawicki and Parton says that effective policy can be measured by comparing the situation before and after the policy was implemented. And in its implementation, a policy can be judged as an incentive policy if it's fulfilled four components: appropriate policy, and appropriate implementation, appropriate target, and appropriate environment. And this is our concept operationalization. And we come to the analysis. For the first is about initial policy aims of COVID tax incentive. We have studied about several regulation of tax incentive, and of the 12 tax incentive items published on the DGT or Directorate General of Taxation website, only 5 regulatory documents on COVID tax incentive contain the purpose of reason for providing tax incentive. These are maintain economic growth stability, maintain people's purchasing power, specific sector productivity, support the virus impact handling, and maintain stock market stability. Not all COVID tax incentives are derived in tax regulation that specifically state the policy objective. So we cannot measure the effectiveness of all the tax incentive. The government only described the general purposes of tax incentive policies for almost all type of tax incentive. In fact, each type of tax incentive certainly has a different target locus, so it will have a different impact on each policy target. Our analysis on the policy effectiveness on the extended COVID tax incentive was, the policy was appropriate because the COVID tax incentive policy was given to help overcome the negative impact of the pandemic in the economic sector. And from the environment aspect, this tax incentive are expected to follow the needs of MSME, the targeted business sector, individual taxpayer, and corporate taxpayer. And as we can see to the on the screen, the graph 2 and graph 3 shows that after the government implemented tax incentive, there are growth in several significant growth in several sector in Indonesia, such as information and communication, of course, as we can see all about is going online, and then followed by the trade industry and processing industry. Some other sectors still not have not show significant improvement, but they still have the growth from the tax incentive. As we can see, and the graph 3 also, Indonesia has economic growth, positive economic growth in 2000 and 2021. From the execution, our analysis is that the realization of COVID tax incentive user is mostly comes from the small medium enterprises sector. That is the highest user of the tax incentive, followed by the income tax article 21, or we can say that wages tax or employment income tax, and the other absorption is still remain low. And to socialize this tax incentive, the DGT use all possible media for socialization, such as the website, online news, social media, and other channel. Okay. Talking about the prospective policy analysis on the extended COVID tax incentive provision, the positive side is the extension of tax incentive is able to maintain people's purchasing power, strengthen the corporate cash flow, attract investors to Indonesia, and maintain economic balance. But the negative impact is that the loss of income, potential loss of income, the cost of resource allocation rising from tax incentive causes a distortion of investment choices by investors, rising enforcement and compliance costs, and lack of transparency arises. We also do benchmarking from Austria, that Austria provides fiscal stimulus in the form of cuts to individual and corporate tax burden, as well as an administrative convenience. The OECD suggests that providing a stimulus in the form of cutting, eliminating, or reducing tax payment obligations for a certain period of time. Okay. As the evidence-based policy recommendation for the appropriate COVID tax incentive, the contribution of tax revenue as a source of state revenue reached over 89% of state budget. In Indonesia, in 2020, Indonesia income tax was only about 1,400 billion. This amount is decreased compared to 2019 with about 1,500 million. The government should no longer extend the incentive to all sectors. If necessary, the government can extend this incentive only to the MSME sector, ease of import for export destination, and sectors related to health services. As for the other sectors, the government can change the form of stimulus into a deferred payment scheme of for taxes owed. In addition, there is a need for non-fiscal stimulus, especially in the health sector, which also very draining for the revenue, for the state revenues. We also have done study cases to one kind of tax incentive deeper, that is the tax incentive of employment income tax. Maybe all of the Sivitas Akademika in Universitas Indonesia take the benefit of this kind of tax incentive. But the results show that how is the effectiveness the tax incentive to increase the taxpayer ability to purchase ability. The results show that only 52% show less effective. So from our analysis, this kind of tax incentive doesn't need it to be extended. The government should alter the focus on another kind of a tax incentive or the sector. Among the factors are less beneficial for workers receiving incentives, extra cost or effort for the employers to comply all of the report for the tax incentive, and potential penalty if the incentive realization report contains an inaccuracy. So it will arise compliance cost of the employer. Okay, we come to the conclusion. The first conclusion is the policy aimed to COVID tax incentive are to maintain economic growth stability, maintain people's purchasing power, maintain productivity for specific sector, support the virus impact handling, and maintain stock market stability. And the second conclusion is COVID tax incentive has resulted quite effective in handling negative impact of the pandemic. Most of policy targets of the tax incentive has seen to be accomplished step by step, even though some policies are not optimally absorbed. The third conclusion is the provision of tax incentives can have positive impact on the economy, but on the other hand, it can endanger financial condition with evidence of increasing state debt. And the fourth conclusion is after policy evaluation on the effectiveness of COVID tax incentive policy, the government must be more selective. According to the data, not every tax incentive type has leverage level for national economic recovery. So we have some recommendation. The first is in formulating tax incentive policy, the government or DGT has to deliver the policy purpose details and formalize it in the derivative regulation. The policy aims information will be useful for policy evaluation, especially for effectiveness measurement. And the second recommendation, the government must conduct policy effectiveness measurement on each type of COVID tax incentive to identify which tax incentive has high leverage level in improving the national economic recovery. It is due to the trade-off that the government face between the need for expenditure and revenue. And the last recommendation is the COVID tax incentive provision. It's good to be extended, but must be more selective and only focus on the high-level leverage incentive in terms of the locus or the target, types, forms, scheme, or prerequisite. For instance, the government can change the incentive scheme, but which was originally in the form of exemption into a delay payment. This scheme can be applied on income tax 21 or employment income tax borne by the government and certain labor intensive sector. Okay, I think that's all my presentation. Thank you, Pak Turo.
Thank you, Bu Nueni. It's very interesting presentation that we probably did not realize that there are tax incentive for many people. Perhaps they don't really realize that there are this facility that is tax incentive. And from your study, it seems that the tax incentive that were given during the pandemic were quite effective in pushing the recovery faster and better. Okay, that concludes the three speakers on the first session. Thank you very much for the three presenters. It's time to open some question and answer session. I see that some people actually already raised their hand, but I did not really see. Sorry, Panitia, is there any question that is already in?
I think we still have no questions for this time being. Dr.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I open the question and answer session from the audience. Is there anybody wants to ask anything or give comment to the three distinguished presenters today? Boleh dalam bahasa Indonesia tentunya, nggak ada masalah. Jadi silakan kalau mau memberikan pertanyaan di dalam bahasa Indonesia. Oke, sambil menunggu pertanyaan datang, mungkin saya ada pertanyaan untuk Bu Inaya. So I have a question for Bu Inaya. If are you with us, Bu Inaya? Because we know that she's somewhere out there. Okay. It seems that Bu Inaya probably has a connection problem. Then I will move to Bu Ayu. Bu Ayu, I have a question. Even though we know that the government has been busy during the state of emergency, I'm at the parliament and in producing regulation unrelated to COVID-19. So my question is, what COVID-19 regulation that have been missed by the government? Have they actually focused more on the pandemic rather than other issues?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Pak Turo, and then for all the audience. So what my study explained in our paper is, in the first period of COVID-19, we have a lot of issue on health. We maybe we can remember last year we have problem about APD, like the minimum APD available, the protection for the health sector, and then the issue about the minimum of the availability of the COVID test. It is very expensive and such like that. And then in those situations, the government not produce the law or perpu, peraturan pemerintah undang-undang, or any regulation to fulfill those needs. But the government and the parliament also very, very specific creates the law that very highly heavy on economic side. Maybe Bu Neni will be explain more about this one, because we are very related in the issue of the how the budgeting issues in the parliament has been reduced using the law made by the executive, while in our constitution very stipulated that APBN is in the power of the budgeting of the parliament, is a constitutional power stipulated under the constitution. But however, according to the Pak Turo question, so the emergency situation basically comes in the situation that what first come first. So the priority is there. And sometimes government and the parliament doesn't see the priority. What is the priority? While in other country, maybe in India or maybe in other country, they have free tasks for the many of the citizen, or push the government. So the parliament push the government, the executive, to give more incentive, or not only incentive, but more protection in healthcare, rather in only in economic, or rather in the other issues. So it's also related to the many of the studies from maybe Tim Lindsay in Australia or Tinman in Australia, and many of the academic side, that many of people said that the government in Indonesia, in the very strong majority partisan power in the parliament for the executive, it's a very easy for the executive to control the legislative agendas. Like maybe more for the proof can read in my paper in the journal. However, the first thing is health. Second is economic. And what I say and then why I study, and the first 3 months, there is no regulation that strongly in the level of the law that stated about the health issues, but strongly in the economic issue. But many of the country, the first is in health issues and the second the economic issue. But in Indonesia, we put first in the economic first. So that's from my perspective.
Thank you, Bu Ayu. So question now, Bu Inaya already? Okay, if not, then probably we can go directly to Bu Neni. You said that it's effective during the COVID, the tax incentive. My question is, how does this tax incentive different from other tax incentives seem when it's not during the pandemic? Is there any specific feature that make it different from other tax incentive?
Okay, thank you, Pak Tura, for the question. Maybe we can use one example. It's tax incentive for the employee. Maybe Pak Tura realized or not, I don't know. Actually, all of the lecturer in University of Indonesia receive this tax incentive in 2021 twice, actually. Now, the tax incentive is aim to increase the purchase power of the employee. Now, what's the difference? The difference is the tax amount is usually paid by the university to the government. Now, in this case, the tax amount is paid back to us as the employee. So that's the difference. The government enacted this policy to make us as the beneficial, the beneficial of the incentive, to make us more consume. If we consume more, we can make the economic movement, especially for the SME sector. So that's the difference. But in fact, in this case, not every employee realize that they have the beneficial, or they don't have really put or consume the tax amount that paid back to them to extra consumption or extra costs in our daily activity. And actually, not every employee can receive the tax incentive, because it depends on the employer role. Universitas Indonesia is one of the employer that give the extra effort for the administrative compliance, but not every employer do that, because they don't think about giving an extra effort to the to do the compliance technique, the compliance administrative cost. They have to, because they still have to struggle how to pay the wage, how to pay the salary to the employee. So in this case, in this kind of tax incentive, actually we think that not really appropriate of the target, because the target is the employee, but the main role has to be done by the employer, right? Yeah, I think that's one kind of the example.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, like Bu Ayu said that the focus seems to be many regulation related to the economy instead of the health. And there is a debate there. It's like, I remember, it's like whether it's like chicken and egg, whether the economy first or the health first. And even in the Satgas itself, also there's some discussion whether actually should be more economy or health. Okay, so I have one question here from Balkis Kalisa for Bu Ayu. Your findings about anomalies during pandemic is quite interesting. Would you mind to explain more about how these anomalies endanger our country and what are the mitigation measures that us in the academic sector can do? That's for Bu Ayu and Bu Neni. Also another question from Balkis. You mentioned before that the tax incentive might endanger the financial condition. Is this happening already? What are the worst cases that might possibly happen? Okay, Bu Ayu,
Okay.
Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Kalisa. So the anomaly I find in my research was the productivity, the first. The second is lack of participation from the public. So the conclusion is like this situation give the benefits for the parliament and also the executive to pass the law that maybe in normal situation cannot be passed easily. So this is the basic things that people has no quite full focus on participation in the parliament, and then sometimes this situation used by the parliament and then also by the parliament and parliament and the executive to reduce the check and balances. However, our constitution in Article 12 stipulated that check and balances, even though in time of emergency, even though it is very difficult in nature, because sometimes in emergency, people tend to do whatever they want to do because it's emergency. Like if I'm in emergency, I'm in danger, I'll do anything to save my life, right? So it's what happened if emergency in a country, the executive will do anything to save our life, to save this nation's life. But what's happened in Indonesia, they save something that's not related to the nations. So not nation actually, but in the healthy or in the pandemic situation. So many of the law that has been passed in last 2 years in the pandemic era, I've been mentioned in my presentation also and also my paper, is not really related to the COVID-19. And also, if those law discussed in normal situation, it always take a long time. While those law that has been passed by the parliament is a very heavy content in the pro and cons, while it's only been discussed for 2 or 3 months. While in normal situation, the parliament should usually takes 1 year or maybe 2 period of discussion time in parliament, or maybe more than 2 or 3 years to discuss one bill. So it is a very, very beneficial situation for the parliament. But for who? That's a question. And how to mitigate those situations is the first is to get the check and balances from other state institution, like a constitutional court. Like I mentioned before, check and balances does not only happen between legislative and executive, but also in judicial power. So thankfully, we have another branch power, which is judicial, while even though many discussion and debates on those things, but yeah, we can still have hopes in judicial power. And then the last one, maybe for the academic, as a participant in this webinar, we need to very carefully put our eyes in the parliament and in all the products that been passed in Indonesia, because even though in terms of emergency, we still have our rights, how to manage our budget and how the government takes our tax to manage in what the priority needs to be first in the situation that's very uncomfortable for all of us. But maybe the instant answer I don't have instant answer, but to explain the situation and to make our concern to see to take the oversight. Maybe the parliament has less power to oversight the executive, so maybe this is the time for the academic and the people to have more oversight to the what's happened in the parliament and the executive. I think that's all in my perspective.
Thank you, Bu Ayu. Bu Neni?
Thank you, Pak Turo. Thank you, Balkis, for the question. Okay. You mentioned about protection my integer, but okay, it is happening already. Yeah, our research was in 2020, and the research objective is toward the 2020 implementation. That was before the government decide to extend all of the type of tax incentive. And fortunately, the government terminate some of the tax incentive and only extend some of the tax incentive to focus on some sector. For example, the government extend the tax incentive for small medium enterprises. As we know that new regulation in 2022, the small medium enterprises with gross income lower than 500 million, sorry, is exempted from income tax. They do not need to pay income tax. So we can see that the government alter the focus on the small medium enterprises. And in the other hand, the government increased the income tax imposition by changing the income tax rate and the layer to the higher layer and rate. Actually, this is aimed to chase or to enforce the tax to the high wealth net individual. So the government in one side lower the income tax from on the small medium enterprises, but in another side the government increase the tax from the high wealth net individual. This is interesting actually. And what if what are the worst cases that possibly happen? The worst cases is maybe the funding for the some sectors can be reduced. For example, for the education sector, maybe all of the lecturer feel already noticed that in 2020 our research budget is reduced until 70%, right? It's from our research grant. It is one of the example, but it can be also happen to another sector. But fortunately, the government already anticipate by changing the tax incentive into the more appropriate tax policy. And refocusing the sector from the small medium enterprises to high net wealth individual. That's one kind of example. Thank you, Pak Turo.
Thank you very much, Bu Neni. I would like to continue this discussion, but unfortunately we do have a time limitation. So I would like to thank you again for the presentation. And we will still have the question and answer session again later on after the second session finish. So if you, the audience or any of us have a question, please withhold the question until the second session finish. Thank you very much. And if it's possible, we would like to give warm applause to the three presenters. Thank you. Okay, so one note that if you have a question, you can do that in Bahasa Indonesia, no problem. So the second session is actually continuation of the first one. If in the first one we talk about big things, about conceptual things, about well, not really theoretical things, but how social scientists involved in the COVID or the pandemic time. We talk about the legislation, we talk about the tax. On the second session, we are going to talk about daily life, especially what happened during the pandemic where we have the mobility restriction. We have to stay at home with all kind of, well, all of us experience that thing, that specific time in our life that will last forever in our mind, in our memory. So at the same time, also this mobility restriction affect not only us who stay at home, but also those who actually have to do their business, have to make their living. And especially those who actually have a small business every day, like informal sector, and also UMKM, or perhaps those who have a small restaurant, small shop, mom and pop shops, and those kind of things. So in this session, we will discuss those issues. We will have three distinguished speakers. They come from Faculty of Psychology, Faculty of Humanities, and Faculty of Economic and Business. First, we will have Ibu Sally Rahadi Asih, PhD, or psycholog known better as Bu Alin. And we will have Bu Mina Elvira, or Bu Ira, and then Pak Dono Sulistiadi Dono Iskandar, MSc. First, we will have Bu Alin. She has PhD in health psychology from University of Texas at Arlington, and then her main research interests are in stress, anxiety, health behavior, pain, grief, and chronic illness. Any of them we want to avoid. Today, she will be talking about revisiting the health measure of staying at home intention. So, Bu Alin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Turo, for the introduction and the warm welcome. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, very much.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, wait a minute. I would like to share my screen. Wait. Is the screen already shared? Udah ya?
Udah.
Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Pak Turo said, my name is Sally Rahadi Asih. I'm from Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Indonesia, but usually people I'm also called Alin. And thank you for coming to the ITTP pre-conference webinar. And for today, my presentation is titled Revisiting the Health Measures of Stay-at-Home Intention. So in the Faculty of Psychology, I'm also part of the lab toward Healthy Mind, Body, and Sexuality lab. So this lab is very busy during the pandemic because a lot of the people or the lecturers in this lab, we are interested in health behaviors and also in mental health as well. So about this today presentation, I'm going to talk about the stay-at-home intention. This topic is always interesting to me. 2 years ago, I would have not imagined that staying at home can be productive and strengthening the bond with my little ones and husband. So I very much like staying at home, working from home. However, there is also a catch by staying at home. There are feelings of isolation. Maybe some of you can relate to me on that. There's also the feeling of being cut off from the rest of the world. Like the world is like stopped, but it's also still like going on at the same time. Although there are a lot of positive that I heard about stay at home, but I've also heard about people who complain about this. Nevertheless, the stay-at-home intention was enforced by the government 2 years ago in a way as a measure to mitigate the COVID-19 spread. Now things can be different in a way that the vaccines are more available. Most of us have been vaccinated. We are more protected against the COVID-19, and also probably we also have a higher or stronger antibody to fight the COVID-19. So is stay-at-home still a relevant measures to be taken? So this is the content of my presentation. First, I would talk a little bit about the introduction, about the stay-at-home concept, and then the studies that have been done on stay-at-home intention, and also the discussion and the future studies, in which the discussion and future studies will be in one giant lump. Okay. So we've heard about the COVID-19 spread as early as 2019 or late 2019. However, it wasn't until early 2022 when we become more vigilant and started thinking that this could affect us, especially us in Indonesia. And in March 2020, the Indonesian government enforced a string of measures to mitigate the spread. These measures are known as the health protocols. These measures also changed our life. I'm sure it's still fresh in our mind how our life changes, how we grapple to adapt with all the new at the time we call it new practice or something, to still doing our daily life, to still live our life, but also to protect ourselves and our significant others from the COVID-19. So one of the measures is the what we call as the stay-at-home orders, in which we become more restricted and we do everything from the comfort of our own home. At that time, we didn't mind because it makes us safer, it makes us feel protected, although we also worried about other things as well. Financially, how do we run our business? How do we live our life? And then how to keep like doing the routine that we are usually do. And then we also feel stressed. I'm sure all of us also at some point felt stressed because there were a lot of adjustment that we need to do. So as the consequences of the health protocol measures is the changes in our life. Here are the things that included in the health protocol measures. We have to wear masks properly even until now. We have to wash our hands regularly, and then do the social distancing, also staying at home. So as early as April 2020, my colleague and I, and also our students, we conducted a survey about the psychological impact about the health protocols, how people do health protocols in times of the staying at home orders from the government. And this is the things, and these are the results that my team and I got in the April from May 2020. So this is the, if we see in here, wait. Okay. If we see in here, this is the question for this is during the stay-at-home order, what I feel, and a lot of people, and then the answers, the option of the answer is from 1 to 5, in which 1 is it doesn't fit me, and 5 it is really me, gitu ya, sangat sesuai. And if we see in here, the loneliness is very high. And then there are a lot of feeling of anxiety, of worry, and then sadness, as well as confused. And then the other one is this as well. So a lot of people feel a lot of in negative emotions. Well, as time passed by, we try to adjust, and then it become the negative emotion become less and less, become less. Another one is this is from the stay-at-home order. What are the stressors that the people felt at that time, or that the people experienced at that time? a lot of them said that. So in here, my team and I, we divided between the city that enforce the stay-at-home order restrictively, stringently, and the city that doesn't, that didn't enforce the stay-at-home order. So most of the participants said that the stressor is the possibility that they'll be affected by the COVID-19. And also a lot of them, the stressor is an inability to access the recreation. And then also about about the solution to stop the COVID-19 from spreading out. This is all are the things, the things that become the stressors during the stay-at-home orders. So if we see in here, all of these are the stressors faced by the government. Are the stressors faced by a lot of people, and based on this, so this is the result of this survey had been presented during the meeting with the KSP 2 years ago, and then there's a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, and then there's when the government also enforce about the stay-at-home orders, and then the transition to have a more normal life at that time. So based on this, stay at home is become one of the things to mitigate or to decrease the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So what is stay at home? Stay at home is an order from the authority, and it restricting the movement of a population. And it's one of the strategy for suppressing or mitigating a pandemic. And sometimes people refer it as lockdown. And so usually when we are talking about stay at home, it's more like something that is enforced by the government. We don't have any choice in that. But when we are talking about stay-at-home intention, it's the intention of individuals to stay at home or restricting their movement even without order from the authority. And these are something that my lab are looking at. So the stay-at-home intention, it's in my lab is assessed using the theory of recent action or planned behaviors. In this, we would like to see what are the factors, what are the predictors that influence people to have a higher stay-at-home intention. It is assumed that the higher the intention, the more likely that people will do that behavior. So in other words, the higher the intention to stay at home, the higher the chance or the possibility of people to stay at home. There are three things that we look at is the attitude toward the behavior, like attitude towards staying at home, and then the subjective norms. It's more like how the norms in that person's social environment influence their the stay-at-home intention, and how the perceived behavioral control, like how the ability of the perceived ability of a person to stay at home will influence the stay-at-home intention. The higher the perceived control, the higher that people perceive that they have the ability to stay at home, the higher the intention to stay at home. This factor is important, especially now when the stay-at-home order is more lenient. It's not as restrictive as before, but we are still in the pandemic, although it is expected that the pandemic will change into endemic. But now, after the government relaxed the health measures, what we see now is increase in the increase in the infection of COVID-19. Although we are more protected, so the risk or the symptoms of the disease are not as severe as it used to be like last year when the Delta happened. So in here, there are several studies that are done by in our lab, and these studies are taken in 2021. So the previous data that I've shown is taken early in the pandemic, which is in 2020, and now it's in 2021. So in here, the study is about the role of attitude and subjective norms on intention to stay at home during the COVID-19 pandemic in young adult. At that time, my lab is focusing on the young adult because young adult, one of their characteristic is making relation, having a social interaction, exploring themselves, exploring their life, exploring the possibilities. So they are a very active group. And also with the young adult, they have this, based on the research, they have this kind of perception that they are still, because they're still young, they are healthy, healthier than the older people. So they are more, their body is stronger to fight the virus, that resulting in low adherence to stay at home. So this is the participant from this study is around 300, age from 18 to 25, which is they are very, very active, physically active and mentally active, and they are really like enjoy like living their life. And 50%, 53% were female, which is this is very good, because usually when psychology do research, most of the participants were female, like maybe 70%, and then only 30% are male. So that we got like 53% were female, which is it's good, because it's a quite balance between the female and the male participants. So based on this study, it was found that attitude and subjective norms, both of them significantly predict the stay-at-home intention. The attitude means that the more positive the young adult see the staying at home, it's more likely they will have higher intention to stay at home. And furthermore, about the subjective norms, the more they are the higher or the more positive the norms about staying at home, it means the higher the intention as well. The subjective norm is it's not only about the norms of the participants. It's also about how participants perceive the social norms regarding the attitude about intention about stay at home in their environment, from their family, usually from their parents, from their friends as well. So what does this studies tell us? It tells that psychoeducation, attitude is very important, and attitude is shaped, it's formed by the psychoeducation, by the knowledge about the importance of staying at home. So it's not about like just using masks, but also restricting ourselves. It's very important as well. And based on this, it is recommended that the psychoeducation is not only for young adults, but it's also for parents and leaders. And in the communal society, as in Indonesia, the influence of the leaders, especially the informal leaders, are very important. So it's recommended that the government also reach for the informal leaders, so they can become like people that that set up the cultures, or set up the standard about how the common people have to act during the pandemic. And another one is another study that has been done is about the knowledge, and this is a look at the risk perception as a mediator for the emerging adults COVID-19 knowledge and stay-at-home intention. So this study was done at the same time with this study. So they are part of the study, and then and they are like divided into several studies actually. So with this, it was found that knowledge is important. Knowledge predicts the stay-at-home intention. The more knowledge that that the participant have regarding about the COVID-19 and the benefit of stay-at-home, the higher the chance of the higher their intention to stay at home. As well, the relationship between the two is mediated by the risk perception. So in here, the more knowledge that we know about the COVID-19, the higher our risk perception, it become more realistic, and that will lead us to increase our intention to stay at home. So once,
Bu Alen,
yes,
5 minutes.
Okay, so yeah. Thank you, Pak Turos. Okay, so once again, the psychoeducation is also important in increasing the intention to stay at home. And another one, this is that I also think is very interesting. This is done by my colleague and his students in our lab. It's about the COVID-19 preventive behavior in young adults living with the elderly, and they used the health belief model, and it was done at the end of 2021. In here, it was found that perceived benefits and cues to action are a positive predictors for staying at home. And this is the results are different from the study conducted in 2022, in which in 2022, the perceived vulnerability is the significant predictor for staying at home. But in 2021, it's not the perceived vulnerability again, because we are already like vaccinated, but it's more like the perceived benefit of what we will get if we stay at home. So I'm just going to skip this. This is more like the activities that people want to have after stay-at-home order, post-stay-at-home orders. So most of them, they want to meet with the friends, hang out with the family, going somewhere, and it's what we see in this in the middle of this year. And what I'm trying to say is in here, like when we are revisiting the stay-at-home intention, is a stringent staying at home intention, it's still relevant? And is there any other form of staying at home intention, more like watered down concept about stay at home intention that can be enforced at this moment? Because stay at home intention, it's still one way to mitigate the COVID, but we cannot live in bubbles. So for the new concept of stay-at-home intentions, there are several variables, or there are several factors that we can see. It's more like, is working from the home productive? How productive it is? From the past 2 years, if we do the study, is it productive to working from home? Is there any beneficial or what are the positive and negative from doing the working from home, and compared to working from the office? Is there any like in the middle line of it? Because now a lot of some workers also are questioning about working the policy of working from the office, because now that they are more adjusted to the more adjusting to working from home. And how about the physical health? And how about the mental health as well? Is living like in a bubble? What are the positive and negative? What are the weakness and strength of staying at home? And how about the attachment with the family? Is it better or is not? And how about the another thing that we must look at is the development of the social skills and relations. Maybe for us that already have developed our social skills and having our own relation, maybe it doesn't matter if stay at home. But how about for the younger ones, like maybe like my daughter, which is like 5 years old, how about her social skills if most of the time she spent at home and using Zoom to go to school, kind of that. And in the long run, there are some, we have to at least gain lessons from this pandemic. now that the monkeypox is spreading, and what are the things that we learn about stay-at-home and stay-at-home intention that can be applied to decrease the spread of the monkeypox, and what are the things that we can, what are the lessons that we can gain that can make us more having a better well-being in the future. So those are the things that are need to be looked at in terms of studies on stay-at-home and stay-at-home intention. So far, my team have done the qualitative studies, but we are still in collecting data. In data collection phase, and up till now the results are mixed. So maybe dividing between the groups in terms of like the younger ones or the workers, it can help in finding like the right things or the more comprehensive policy for all. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much for the attention. Pak Turo, saya kembalikan ke Pak Turo ya Pak.
Okay, thank you, Bu Alin. It's really interesting that most of us, at least after 2.5 of the pandemic, have favorable, at least at personal level, have favorable view about staying at home, work from home, because of the flexibility in time, because of the work, but not work. And we can do whatever we want, whether from home or actually in 2021, perhaps already start to work somewhere else. But it turns out there are many considerations that we have to pay attention, that it might be positive, it might be convenient for us, but the long-term consequence and also the level of stress that some people have must be addressed. Thank you, Bu Alin. We will get back to you later. But now we're going to talk about a certain part of population that Bu Alin mentioned, who work but also have to deal with the COVID. Even without COVID, this segment of people, of population, already have some trouble, already have some issues. And what happened during COVID? So, Ibu Mina Elvira, PhD, or she said that you can call me Mina or Ira. She has a PhD in Gender Studies in Faculty of Arts, University of Melbourne, Australia. And her main interest is on Minangkabau, Russia, interesting Minangkabau and Russia, and literary in general. She's from the Faculty of Humanities, and today she's going to present a paper entitled Female Workers Balancing Act Between Domestic and Public Spheres After the Outbreak of COVID-19. Bu Mina or Bu Ira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Turo, for the introduction and warm welcome. Good morning, everybody, conference participants. Hope you are well and still have enough energy to listen to my presentations because it's almost lunchtime, yeah? It's quite hard. My topic for today's presentation is about working from home issue. The way female workers balancing their activities between domestic and public spheres after the outbreak of COVID-19. This presentation is based on research which was started in the middle of 2020 by a research team consisting of myself as team leader, Bambang Wibawarta, Ruli Esther, and Vandra Febrian. Excuse me, is there any slide? Pak Tura?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. As all of us may know that the outbreak of COVID-19 started in China around January 2020 has caused not only a global health emergency, but also an abruptly radical change in our social and private lifestyle. As Ibu Sali also mentioned, physical distancing, social distancing, lockdown, work from home, and learn from home have become the most frequently spoken words in our daily lives. In 15th of March 2020, President Joko Widodo appealed to Indonesian citizens to work, study, and worship at home in order to minimize the spreading in this pandemic virus. The urge to work and learn from home is not as easy as it's been said. Arguably, the stay-at-home lifestyle has impacted on Indonesian citizens' daily life matters. Next slide, please. Here, some picture showing the implementation of Indonesian government policy regarding COVID handling. As you can see that the first picture that there is a physical distancing in the first Friday prayer service at UE Mosque during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the right one is an announcement in a supermarket during the COVID-19 pandemic about restriction for senior citizens and children to go inside shopping area. Next, please. Here, some more picture reports from media showing impact of pandemic for social condition. For example, in the left side, yeah, we need to wear masks most of the time, even though we cannot afford to buy a proper mask. And there is also, we can see that from the picture about the mobility restriction. Yes, next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, one of the important issues which tend to be slipped away because it's considered normal is how working mothers cope with this situation, balancing their acts in conducting professional, social, and domestic works at the same places, their homes. We see the importance to address working from home mothers issues when we see various gender bias responses in mass media regarding staying at home. For example, the Malaysian Ministry of Women, Family and Community Development urged working mothers to put makeup and dress nicely while working from home. She also urged women to not say sarcastic things about domestic work to their husband, because husbands often need to be taught first to do it. Another example, in the beginning of pandemic season, there's a meme with two little kids speaking on phone. The kid on the left side asks, "How is learning from home going?" And the kid on the right side answer, "I can't stand it. My mom is more fierce than my teacher at school. She always yells at me." We might love looking this meme, but it strengthens the premise that domestic spare, including be responsible for the children's homework or assessment, is a woman's job, not the man. Even though nowadays, women have more opportunity and they can empower themselves, the division of gender roles between men and women is still exists as a dominant construction. Gender and power relation is influenced by the dynamic of social, cultural, and political condition. So we argue that it is important to carry out the study of the impact of staying at home program to gender and power relation at the household and also a function of home. As Bu Ina mentioned that there are a lot of research on COVID, but overlooking its social and cultural dimension. So I hope that our research that will fill the gap. We have some literature review regarding issue about domestic and public spares. One is conducted by Hochschild. She argued that at home women tend to spend more time doing domestic work called the second shift than men. And there is also research conducted by Indonesian researcher Wahid Zuhdi Chandraningsi about how Indonesian women negotiate the roles between domestic and public spares. And also Elvira also conducting research about how women as homemakers creating their homes in order to make in order to impose new ideologies. But all of the research is conducted before COVID pandemic. There are some research after pandemic is conducted by Ellen, Orsted, Ramsey, and Tertit. Argue that economic downturn caused by the current COVID-19 outbreak has substantial implication for gender equality. So it's still related, but it's not specific in Indonesia and more focused on economical matters by using economic approach. We argue that local tradition may give different impacts on the changes of gender equality values. Women's negotiation may also differ as they may face different patriarchal norms. Next slide, please. Yeah, so research focuses how far does Indonesian government's working from home program give an impact in changing patriarchal gender power relation, and to what extent women modify their home functions and lifestyle in coping with COVID-19 pandemic condition. So this study will attempt to see how working mother that forced to go back to home, using home as a place to renegotiate their gender roles and reconstruct power relation at home in order to have more gender equality. Next slide, please. Yeah, there are some theories used as analysis tools, Kandiati patriarchal bargain concept and Hollow's anti-single stereotype of housewife critics. Hollow's argued that there is no a singular and fixed image of housewife. And Karubia, Karubia argument also be used as a tool analysis. They mentioned that home is a dynamic set to re-evaluate and meditate power relation. Next slide, please. The research use qualitative method using a feminist approach, using a feminist perspective to approach the data. There is including we use qualitative methods, including in-depth interview and questionnaire filling, and focuses on sample of 30 middle-class female workers living in Jabodetabek area. These women chosen by using snowball method are working wives whose husbands do working from home as well, and mothers of their own growing children. The data are mostly collected through media electronic. We focus on the interview of these respondents to get what's going on in daily life, because Reinhardt emphasized the importance of doing interview to collect women's stories that often overlooked in society where patriarchy norms become a dominant discourse. The respondents' identities are disguised by using pseudonym in order to protect their privacy, because the issues are quite sensitive. Yeah, because about relationship, interpersonal relationship at home. Next slide, please. There are some finding that we can find after doing research. That the first one is that it seemed that the respondents do modifying daily activities during pandemic season. Yeah, some respondents taught us that on one side the condition gives some benefits. They don't have to get up and get out of home early to go to their office. They also can save some money, usually spend for lunch or makeup, and most importantly, they can spend more time for closely and physically meeting their family member. A respondent taught me that the positive side of being at home is that she can have more quality and bonding time with her 3-year-old daughter. Before COVID-19 break out, she put her daughter at daycare every day, so the time to interact with her daughter was limited. So I think she thought that this is the good thing, that staying at home, working at home. The next slide, yeah, please. But some problem also arise before. Home as a place to release stress after working outside. Now has become a stressful place too, since it's been used for working and other activities. Yeah, so it's because there is no separate line between work and home anymore. One respondent said that home as place to give attention to my children is gone. So there is some problem, and there is also problem regarding interpersonal relationship between husband and wife. One respondent thought that she feels stressful, in fact, that because she had to stay in one place for 24 hours with her husband, because usually they just meet no more than 6 hours every day, because both of them are working. So there are some problem about this thing. So female workers have to cope with hectic situation in doing their domestic and public roles in one place, their home. So home is also a stressful place for some respondents. Next slide, please. Yeah, and pandemic situation also has given female workers an opportunity to bargain with imposed patriarchal value that restrict their power. To a certain extent, traditional gender roles between men and women put women as a subordinate in her relationship with men. Some women try to bargain it. For example, this dynamic about lowering, elevating one's position in the relationship between husband and wife is found in this respondent answer. She usually generally putting husband as the former head of family, while in daily practice, some of them are the de facto leaders and main breadwinners of their family. Here one example about the situation reported by one of my our respondents. Yeah. At first, my respondent said that her husband is one who takes control in doing the family business, managing all, and also ask her husband control family business. But later on, she told me, in fact, she herself will handle everything. She's the one who takes control in doing the family business, in fact, managing all, and also ask her husband to help her in the kitchen. So, so here we can see that in the loved one, there is a picture, there is a family meeting, you know, and we can see that the husband sitting on the chair and actively lead the discussion, while the a woman as one of the women as wife, just listen carefully, not talking too much, not talking too much. But in fact, what's happened, that's in fact, as she taught us that in fact, she's the de facto leaders of this family business. So they are kind of like playing. They do that because it is that women's strategy to secure the power, but at the same time to maintain the harmonious relationship with her husband. So that's why she taught me about that. So she taught in ethnic language that mendudukkan suami, that how I put my husband on the chair. So it's that for politeness.
5 minutes left.
The next, yeah, next slide. Yeah.
5 menit.
Do I have still time?
5 minutes. 5
okay.
minutes.
So there is also that we can our research have found out that there is a renegotiate patriarchal gender relation power by minimizing their husband's single-hand authority. This is we can see from respondents' answer. Next slide. Yeah, husband also in various degrees participate more in doing those domestic works and taking care of their own children. So before, for example, that one respondent told me that her husband who doing shopping because of dissertation and also domestic works, and since and while she's busy working online because her husband, because of dissertation, lost his job. Yeah, the sample. Yeah, and there is also negotiating traditional patriarchal gender role. So with economic power, some women at some point resist to acknowledge their husband position as the head of the family. A respondent openly told me that she doesn't want to say clearly who is the head of the family, as can be seen from her statement. And also, one respondent also openly told me that she doesn't like doing domestic work. So she instead of she hire a public assistant to do that, because she has money for that. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah, there is also modifying traditional division of house rooms. A kitchen, for example, a kitchen as center of family business and social activities, while a living room as a classroom. Please, the next slide. Yeah, and there are also some respondents using their homes as places to educate their children gender equality values. So that's happened. Yeah. What interesting that a woman, working mother, after forcing to go back to their homes, they also forcing to go back to their own kitchen. But it is for the good thing. Women use their domestic and additional skill to help family financial crisis. Like this respondent told me, because like cooking, she opened food business, share the job, she do everything, helped by her children's mother-in-law and husband. So this is help family regarding financial matters. Next. Yeah. The condition, working at home also have given some women opportunity to expanding social activities and also to get additional job. So there is some blessing in this guys because of the situation. We can see from this answer. the conclusion that as the impact of COVID pandemic condition, the middle class working mothers who have been forced to go back to their homes to different degrees use their homes as struggling places to renegotiate the old patriarchal role divisions and unequal gender power relation. Their homes, to some extent, are used as learning site for gender equality values and modified to fill their extended functions as domestic, working, and social spares. Working from home program has given women some good opportunities, creating second job, and developing self-actualization, even though at the same time, women have to cope with hectic situation in doing their domestic and public roles in one place, their homes. I think that's all my presentation, Pak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bu Ira. Nice presentation, and it's really nicely placed after the first presentation by Bu Alin. That from Bu Alin, we hear how it's very stressful for some people actually, even though staying at home does have benefit, but also negative. In Bu Ira, we learn the changes of gender dynamics between male and female in some, at least in some families, where it's used by some women to, well, quote unquote, educate the husband, even though it's probably not by intention, but because the husband is there, and the woman said, okay, why don't you just help me a little bit with washing dishes and stuff, and also teach the children to do chores. It seems that some were a little kid doing this wash. Yeah, thank you. And if you have questions, please hold, because we will go to the last speaker, but surely not the least. So after we talk about what happened at home, now we talk about what happened in the working place, especially those in small business. As we know that pandemic already have impact in many areas of life, but for small business, it means their living. It means that their family income that are affected. So today we have Pak Sulistiadi Dono Iskandar, and I think his friends call him Dono. He has MSc in economics from University of Edinburgh, UK, and his main interest is in development economics, microfinance, and medium and small enterprise. Today, Pak Dono will talk about the resilience of middle and small enterprise during the COVID pandemic. Pak Dono, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Turo. Yeah, hope I'm not the least in this last presentation. Is the screen is correct? Not yet.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, we can see already.
But is it still in presenter view or already?
Yeah, it's still those tools. So you need to go to display settings.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Pak Turo, for the opportunity. Now I will present about last topic, the resilience of MSME during the COVID-19 pandemic. This would be based on our survey, as my capacity as researcher in PM FEBUI. So this is the outline of my presentation, brief info regarding of what we have done, and then what's the role of and importance of MSME in Indonesia, and then the overall of the general picture of what happened to the MSME during the pandemic, and then the general impact, and then the last would be the key findings. So this is what we have done in the last 2 years. We have several opportunities in LPM. We have trusted by several parties to conduct the research regarding what is the impact of COVID-19 to the MSME. This is at least most of all of my results that I will be present in this presentation would be based on these 4 studies. The first study is this is the first study that we conduct regarding the impact of COVID to the MSME. We did this in July 2020 in the support of UNDP. Our respondent is in 15 provinces and across sector. Yeah. The same goes for the second study. In this study we have a bigger coverage in 20 provinces with 3,000 respondents, and we also did this in collaboration with LD ya, Pak Turo mungkin Pak Turo juga banyak berperan di sini. Bahkan malah actually I did not involve directly in this in the second study, but I think the result is so precious, so it would be unfortunate if I'm not include the result of the study in this presentation. And as for the third study, we do it with Bank of Indonesia. I directly involved in the first, third, and the fourth study. In the third study, we have slightly different focus, so we exclude the medium and the medium size enterprise. So we focus on the smaller size business, and we also add one other category called subsistence business. So basically, this is in theory, subsistence business is those business who who operates just in order to survive ya, sekedar menyambung hidup lah intinya. They run their business just to in order to keep their survival. So our criteria to put someone into subsistence category is if the per capita income of the household is less than the poverty line. And the last study is we do it with BRI in 2029. The purpose of this study is also quite different because we want to look what is the evolution of MSME after 1 year of pandemic. So when we did this in May, when the study started, this is when the condition is already getting better. Yeah, the restriction has been relaxed. The case is also lower. Yeah. So the idea is we would like to see the MSME might have been getting better. They may have recovered, but actually, in the end of the period of the study, the Delta came and then the situation got worse. Okay, so that's the summary of what we have done. And then this is the perhaps, I would like to remind you all about the role of MSME, the importance of MSME in Indonesia economy. We have based on data Kemenkop, Ministry of Cooperative and MSME, they said that we have 65 million per 2019. It comprised about almost all the business entity in Indonesia. Like almost 100 business unit in Indonesia. It also contributes more than 60% of our GDP. And perhaps some of us may not aware that MSME also have a big contribution to our export and our foreign reserve cadangan devisa, because they also contribute to more than 15% of our export. And the most important thing is they provide significantly large number of job creation in Indonesia. 97% of Indonesia's workforce absorbed by MSME based on the Kemenkop data. So if 97% of Indonesians workforce work in MSME sector, we could imagine how big the impact of it if COVID also have an impact to the MSME. Because usually, we know that MSME have a characteristic they selalu digadang-gadang they have a big resilience toward typical economic crisis. They have been the backbone of our economies in 98 crisis, in mortgage crisis 2008, like they have no impact at all. But however, it was not the case for this COVID-19 crisis, because due to the characteristic of the MSME transaction itself, that especially the smaller one, that usually require face-to-face interaction. So when regardless of the sector, whether it is service, whether it is trade sector, whether it is manufacturer, usually when you want to interact, when you want to have a transaction with MSME, before pandemic, usually we have to have a face-to-face interaction. That's why restriction policy is argued to be the source of negative impact of pandemic to the MSME. If we may recall, this is the evolution of social restriction policy in Indonesia. Perhaps this will be included in our children curriculum in the future. So in summary, what I would like to say is the color is representing how strict the regulation was. So if we make PSBB as the baseline, we could see a relaxation in the PPKM Mikro, but then it get even stricter than PSBB when the emergency PPKM is enacted. So like for example in restaurant, when PPKM emergency, there is to have dine-in is strictly forbidden. When in PSBB it still have some, you could still have probability to be able to eat in the restaurant. So if we make the timeline of how tight is the social restriction, we could see the perhaps the strictness would be peak in the September in PSBB, and then it kind of like slow down, goes down, even goes lower when PPKM Mikro enacted, but eventually it becomes so strict in the time of PPKM emergency. Nah, based on our survey that we conducted with BRI in 2021, this is remember this is limited to only micro respondent, and the sector also limited only perdagangan, trade, restoran dan akomodasi dan juga jasa. So you could imagine this is the so small, those micro. So don't think this about like restoran, but think this like mungkin kayak tukang somai, tukang bakso di pinggir jalan, something like that. Most of them say that pembatasan social restriction is have a very impactful to their business, with general pattern of in Java and in urban area, the impact is deemed to have more impact than in rural or in outside Java. And the most aspect that deemed the most impactful is in education institution and the workplace. So we could we imagine that this is due to the mostly in the sector of restaurant accommodation in the office area like in Sudirman or in education institution in near big campus in Indonesia or in the SD, SMP, SMA. Based on our discussion with several MSME, yeah, we have a direct conversation with them. So yeah, those who located in center of economic activity such as shopping center, they become impacted because of the maximum capacity policy, and then the restriction of opening hour. Of course, it would reduce their revenue. And those who operate service in near of the education activity affected because of no student during distance learning policy applied. Yeah, this is like not only transport. The impact of no student is kind of big. So like even like for services like for trade, yeah, stationery, and then service like jasa fotokopi atau misalkan akomodasi kos-kosan, akomodasi makan minum, warteg dan penjajah-penjajah makan lainnya, ini yang the most impacted one. And in agricultural sector, the social restriction, the channel comes from because the reduction in demand, yeah, from other city, because there is a restriction, yeah, if we want to move to other city, yeah. And then this also applies other than agriculture, also applies for other sector with value chain that involve interregional value chain. Yeah, so like we have also discussion with manufacturer of Muslimah fashion clothing. They have difficulty because they cannot access their raw material because the strict restriction of transport policy. So they have to switch to other supplier with higher raw material, higher price. And for business manufacturing in MSME such as handicraft, the decline was caused by like there is a shifting in consumer behavior because now they focus only to buy the basic need. So non-essential consumption such as handicraft become neglected, and also the decrease in number of visitor in this area.
5 minutes left.
Oh yeah, thank you, Pak Turo. Okay, now I would like to share several general impact pattern that may interest you. The first is based on our study in UNDP, medium and large enterprise seems to have to be more likely. Yeah, so the like 88% experience decrease in revenue, while micro and small only 74. And it is also interesting that once you are impacted, yeah, so the picture in the left is the probability whether you will be impacted or not, and in the right is when you are experience a decrease, how much is the magnitude. Yeah, we could see that the magnitude of those who experience more than 40% of the revenue, it become higher. Yeah, so if we could see this, as we go large, yeah, the business go large, the magnitude of the decrease of the revenue become also higher. This is interesting pattern. Yeah, so there is an indication that medium and large suffer more through the pandemic. But then, based on our study with BI, if we zooming in by adding the subsystem definition, you notice this is the different survey with the previous one. But there is a consistent pattern for micro and small business where the probability is to be impacted somewhat comparable, yeah. But the subsistence have the bigger probability. So if we can take a conclusion, micro and small is have probability to be impacted like maybe 80%, but then subsistence have around 90%, and medium and large based on study with UNDP also have slight like 90%. So we have kind of like U shape, yeah. So if you are very small, you will be very likely to be impacted, as well as if you are very large. But those in the middle, they have like perhaps they have more flexibility to have a maneuver to cope with the pandemic. But the pattern of when you go bigger, the magnitude also go bigger seems to be robust. We could see this, yeah. So as you go bigger, the magnitude will become also bigger. Yeah, this is our another key finding, that policy debt restructuring policy is a indication that debt restructuring policy is significant in helping the MSME, because when they have the debt restructuring, they will have more available fund. Yeah, they would also, when they apply for debt restructuring, usually they would consult with their colleague or with the business consultant, and would also require them to make a long-term business plan. In this, business performance in terms of number of worker, we could see what we are only showing that pandemic, yes, indeed, make a decrease in number of MSME that hired during pandemic. This short-term strategy related to worker, what I want to say is a strategy related to laying off worker is more common practice, of course, in medium and large, because in small and micro, they perhaps even do not have a worker, yeah. But it is a consistent pattern that common practice, reducing utility cost is a common practice in coping with to survive. This is also interesting that Times teach MSME how to cope with the pandemic, but not in terms of their optimism in achieving a pre-pandemic level. So when we ask them how long you could survive in pandemic in 2020, like only 55% that say they could survive more than a year. But then in 2021, even more of them, most of them, like very optimistic they could survive in a sustainable manner. So it's like, yeah, okay, we have done this, we have experienced this pandemic in 1 year, we know how to survive. But then when we ask how long it would take to reach pre-pandemic level, in 2021, they become more pessimistic. So yeah, you could survive, but you could not go back into before pandemic. That's like in their psychological mindset. This is about digitalization. What I would want to say is the adoption of digitalization is still not optimal, because like you could say before pandemic and during pandemic, for micro and small, the increase is only like 5 and 6%, and the significant increase also only enjoyed by medium and large company, MSME.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Please wrap up because
okay, thank you.
Time.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is the cost. Okay, I will. This is should be, yeah, this is the wrap up, Pak Turo. So the conclusion and summary is, unlike previous typical economic crisis, COVID-19 economic crisis hit MSME very hard. And once you are impacted, the magnitude of the impact seems to be higher for the bigger size MSME. Cost-cutting strategy is the most common strategy for MSME across size. Relaxation policy related to liability of loan provide more room for MSME to maneuver through pandemic. Online strategy adoption seems feasible only to bigger size MSME. Why? The most common obstacle is barrier to technology. It's the biggest challenge. Yeah, they do not know how to operate, etc. Followed by lack of facility. And the last COVID-19 crisis also affect financial behavior, such as reducing interest to access loan and also in decreasing or reducing the saving behavior. I think that's all, Pak Turo. Sorry for time consumed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Saving behavior. I think that's all, Pak Turo. Sorry for time consumed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Dono. So what I got is, unlike the other economic shock, especially in 1980, 1997, 1998, and also 2008, the pandemic economic shock actually affected the small enterprise very much because of the restriction in mobility and so on. And as a result, they have to go to cost cutting. And interestingly, instead of laying off the workers, many of them actually chose to either reduce the number of the working hours or reduce the wages. So that's really nice. Thank you very much. So for the three presenters, we still have about at most 10 minutes actually for a question and answer. One question already asked to Bu Alin. Basically, the person asked, is it effective working from home? Please, Bu Alin.
Okay, thank you, Pak Turo. Okay, yeah, so about how effective it is to work from home. There's a lot of flexibility in working from home in a way that we can do a lot of things at the same times. So this flexibility can give the perception that it is efficient to work from home. But whether it is really efficient in terms of the target that are given to the workers, it has to be look closely, look in detail. For example, like this, it is before the pandemic, it wasn't easy to make us the lecturers to have like MOOCs or to have like online teaching. But now because there's a pandemic, we learn how to do online teaching and there's a lot of videos about us teaching. So if that's the target is about the online, something that is related to online, it can be more efficient. But it can be very difficult to achieve that. That's what I can answer about the efficiency. But another things that also that I look at, it's about the boundaries, about the lack of boundaries that happen when we are working at home. In a way that we do all the things at the same times. So in a way that we don't have any like transition time between working and leisure time. When we work from home, our time for commute is the time when it ready us to prepare us prepare us for working. Vice versa, when on our time from commute from home from our work to our home, it's the time for us to transition between as a worker to become as like part of the family, to our personal time. So this lack of boundaries brought up by the working from home, in a long term, it can tax our mental ability. It can become the stressors for us because it makes us feel that we don't have time to just sit and relax. And that's the things that we need to take care of. So one of the things that we can do is we create our own boundaries while we work at home. There are several things we can see from we can do physical boundaries, like having a designated working place at home. So when we enter that designated place, it prepare us to like, okay, now it's time for me to work. Or we have like times not to check our WhatsApps, because I'm sure now we check our WhatsApp a lot of times juga gitu ya, with this kind of situation. And beside the physical boundaries, there are things that we can do, like a psychological boundaries. Like this is my time to relax, for me time, or to spend time with family. So I don't want to check. I don't need to check on my job, on my work at this moment. So the boundaries help us in maintaining our mental health. Also, the boundaries also help us in promoting our sleep as well. One of the problems with the working from home is our sleep patterns can become very irregular. We can work up until wee hours of the morning and then wake up at maybe 9 or 10, or just become irregular. While having a good night's sleep is very good, because it helps us in consolidating our memories. During sleep, our body regenerate new cells, so make us even more more fit in the morning. So this kind of boundaries are needed to help us maintain the balance between work and home, between our life and our personal life and our professional life. And in terms of there's also questions about what can we give recommendation to the government. Maybe the government can look at the hours by the hours that workers need to work, like the jam yang kewajibannya kerja berapa lama, and then make regulation about the pembagian dari working hours itu. Mungkin itu salah satu yang bisa dilakukan. And also the knowledge that flexibility is good, but flexibility can interfere with the boundaries, with the balance between our life, our personal and our professional life. I think that's all from me, Pak Turo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There is still one question, but because of the interest of time, I probably will direct to you directly after the web conference. But there's one question for Ibu Inaya. I think this will conclude the question and answer. So the question is, what would be the ideal involvement for social scientists to overcome the pandemic? And Bu Inaya said, unfortunately, there is no ideal involvement, because the closer to the central government we are, the more influential social sciences could be on policy making, the further we would be from identifying academically and practically the needs of vulnerable communities. The closer we are with the communities, the more responsive we are to the needs, both academically and practically, but we will be under resources. So that's kind of dilemma there. A realistic practice is to build an alliance between social scientists and health scientists, working closely with policymakers, with social scientists and health scientists working on a grassroots as well, with CSO and communities, so that resources can be mobilized in the interest of those most affected by the pandemic. That's Bu Inaya answers. So thank you very much for the three presenters on the second session, Bu Alin, Bu Ira, dan Pak Dono. I hope this session will be beneficial for all of us who are attending. So I will conclude this second session and also the whole sessions about some things that we learned. First, we learned that various studies in social science and humanities regarding COVID have been done. And those examples that we heard today cover a wide range of issues, from the involvement of social sciences or social scientists, parliamentary agenda, tax incentives, work from home, gender, and small business enterprises. And we also see and hear that they employ different methods according to their respective disciplines. So these understandings calls for more collaboration, not only among researchers in social sciences and humanities, but also with those in health sciences so that we can do better in mitigating the pandemic and hopefully have our recovery process better too. So many thanks to the organizer, Faculty of Public Health, and also the supporters of this webinar, Faculty of Law, Faculty of Humanities, Faculty of Economics and Business, Faculty of Psychology, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, and Faculty of Administrative Science. I'm Turo Wongkaran. Thank you for being with us. I get back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turo, for guiding today's presentation and discussion. There are so many valuable knowledge and insights for us from today's discussion. So once again, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to you, Dr. Turo. Okay, and now we are reaching the final stage of our today's webinar. But before we close the webinar, we would like to invite Professor Dr. Mondastri Korip Sudaryo, MSDSC, the Dean of Faculty of Public Health, Universitas Indonesia, to give take-home message and closing statement. Professor Mondastri, please. Prof. Mako, I guess you're still muting your microphone.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, dear MC, Mbak Adinda. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Dear honorable professors, colleagues, expert and committed organizers, and all notable participants of the webinar, thank you very much for participating actively in this important webinar. Thanks God, we are so grateful that we can conduct this webinar entitled The Roles of Social Sciences and Humanities in Dealing with COVID-19 Pandemics. This webinar, organized by Faculty of Public Health, University of Indonesia, is a part of pre-conference webinar series. We got 5 webinars or 6 webinar series in conjunction with the second International Teleconference on Technology and Policy, abbreviated as ITTP, for supporting implementation of COVID-19 recovery plan in Southeast Asia. So just for you to know that the ITTP forum embraces membership of 10 ASEAN countries and 27 well-known universities in these 10 countries. For the 2 sessions we have followed in this webinar, we have now learned that the COVID-19 pandemic has actually caused multidimensional impacts globally, not only concerning health and medicine, which mostly take major attention, but it also gives adverse impact on many aspects of human life, such as economics, psychology, social, politics, law, administration, transportation, etc., and even custom and culture, I suppose. As the pandemic has strongly related to behavioral aspect, then the roles of social sciences and humanities become critical in understanding and dealing with the pandemic. As the pandemic has strongly related to behavioral aspects, so we have then pay also attention with these roles of social science and humanities. Through this webinar, all distinguished expert and resource person that I cannot mention one by one, I'm sorry, had provided their bright and impressive presentation. Moderated and summarized and concluded by Dr. Turo Wongkaran, a respected expert team member of Satgas COVID-19 from Faculty Economic and Business, Universitas Indonesia. I believe that today's webinar has successfully been enlightening and increasing our awareness about the roles of social sciences and humanities in dealing with this COVID pandemic. Before closing, allow me to express our high appreciation and thank you very much to all honorable speakers and moderator, as well as our dedicated organizer making this event finish successfully. And thank you very much as well to all the notable participants of the webinar. And finally, allow me, on behalf of Faculty of Public Health, Universitas Indonesia, to gratefully announce that this webinar is now officially closed. Wish all of us could have been enjoying the enlightening knowledge sharing and the perceiving meaningful awareness. May God bless all of us. Since the pandemic still exists, please keep safe and healthy. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mandastri, for the closing statement. But before we officially close this webinar, we would like to invite all speakers to kindly open the camera. So we would like to capture our screen for documentation. Okay, so we are inviting Dr. Krota Yuni, Dr. Mina, Dr. Agustin as well. Please be willing to open your camera. Thank you. And the organizing committee will assist us to take your pictures, and so please be ready.
Pak Dono, kemana Pak Dono? Ah.
Right? Okay, so our organizing team is already preparing for the documentation session. So I'm counting down from 3, 2, 1, and smile. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pak Turo, terima kasih banyak.
Sama-sama Pak Dekan, Bu Agustin, terima kasih banyak. Ini karena pesan Ibu.
Luar biasa. Terima kasih banyak semua.
Terima kasih semua. Mudah-mudahan kita bisa bekerja sama lebih baik lagi.
Amin.
Terima kasih semua pembicara, panitia, Bu Popi.
Terima kasih panitia dan semuanya.
Thank you to participants, speakers, moderator, and guests for your participation today. And we also would like to invite all of you to participate in our another webinar on the 3rd August, which is tomorrow, concerning on health economics evaluation for innovative medicines. If you need any details for the webinar series and our teleconference as well, please kindly visit our website at www.ittp2022.org. Honorable participants, I will close this webinar by saying massive thank you to all of you. Please stay healthy and happy. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih. Sampai ketemu lagi.
Sehat selalu, izin pamit.
Amin.
Izin pamit.
Izin pamit. Terima kasih panitia. Terima kasih Pak Turo.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Sampai ketemu lagi.
Sehat selalu, izin pamit.
Amin.
Izin pamit.
Izin pamit. Terima kasih panitia. Terima kasih Pak Turo.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Sampai ketemu lagi.
Sehat selalu, izin pamit.
Amin.
Izin pamit.
Izin pamit. Terima kasih panitia.